Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us again for the March 5th, 2014 edition of the vBrownBag US broadcast. My name is Trevor Roberts, also known as @VMTrooper on Twitter, and tonight we have the topic Automating Exchange and Active Directory with VMware vCenter Orchestrator and PowerShell, presented by Sean Massey, whose Twitter handle is Sean P. Massey. So just a couple items before we get into the actual content. First, if you want to join in on the conversation online, you can do so by following the vBrownBag hashtag. And I'd also like to make you aware of the other brown bags in other time zones in case you feel like getting up really early in the morning or staying up really late. First, we have the Asia Pacific. That's every other Thursday, 9 p.m. New Zealand Standard Time. The EMEA brown bag, which is Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Latin America, which is Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in Espanol. And we also have the U.S., which is happening right now, of course, that you're here with me, Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. We also have, for those of you who have been following our automation series, a Google Plus group. If there are any automation items that you'd like to discuss there that take more than 140 characters on Twitter, feel free to go to the Google Plus group and take the conversation there. And then to catch up on any of our previous recordings, any other brown bag topics that you may have missed, feel free to check out the iTunes podcast subscription, and you can also get a feed following with RSS on the feed burner. So again, our guest is Sean. My name is Trevor, and we're ready to get things started. So Sean, I will go ahead and pass you the ball. Let's change presenters here. Okay, Sean, so you should be able to share your screen whenever you're ready.
All right. Can everybody see that?
We can now.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. Good evening, everybody. As Trevor said, my name is Sean Massey. I'm a systems admin with Faith Technologies in Appleton, Wisconsin. They're an electrical contractor. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about how to automate Microsoft Exchange and Active Directory using vCenter Orchestrator and PowerShell. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean P. Massey, and I also am a blogger at my blog is seanmassey.net. All right, so to kind of get things started here, usually you don't think of vCenter Orchestrator as something to automate the Microsoft stack. So why did we go this route and use this program? Well, to start with, when we started looking at automating our infrastructure, we had no existing job scheduling software. So we didn't have any systems to really take advantage of a batch scheduling system or anything like that that we could just kind of streamline and use to automate our processes. vCenter Orchestrator also integrated with our existing environment already. It already integrated directly with Active Directory for authentication. It has PowerShell plugins. It has plugins for UCS and other parts of our environment that we wanted to take advantage of. With all those extra plugins, it's also easy to extend, and it's very flexible. And I'll show you some of that flexibility tonight with some of the jobs that we've started to deploy. Also, we wanted to delegate a lot more to our help desk. With the way some of our Active Directory groups were set up, it was always falling on me or one of the other two sysadmins on our team to constantly go in and update group permissions that would have been better served by the help desk. This allows us to do that without making any changes to our Active Directory permissions or structure. It also has the ability at some point where we could turn on the web interface and allow other people in our environment, whether it's HR or our dev team, to log in and do the tasks that they need to do without having to open help desk tickets or without having to have somebody from IT do it for them. That's a little bit further down the line. We're still getting up to speed and making sure that we have all the jobs that we need, and we have all the automation processes working properly for some of our newer jobs, plus making sure that we have actually all the processes in general documented and ready to go. And finally, it's very easy to deploy. VCO does come as an appliance. It's installed with vCenter. Everything we're doing in our environment is with the VCO appliance. When working with WinRM to do some PowerShell stuff, that has added a little bit of complexity, but it's not too difficult to get set up and configured. So here's a few of the things that we're doing with VCO today and things that we are planning to do. The main focus of what we're doing is automating our routine tasks. And here's just a couple of examples that we've worked on. Conference room creation in Exchange is a big one. It's a task we don't do very often. And our process was 2 pages, single spaced with all the different commands. It was a perfect candidate for automation. Another one is the user termination procedure. So when somebody leaves the company, we had a very long document, a process that had to jump between multiple people, required people to be logged in after hours to move stuff to avoid utilizing all of our bandwidth and impacting actual business operations. So this was a process that by automating it, we've actually been able to save time, reduce errors, and keep people from being tethered to work after hours. We're working on taking that sort of thing also to user creation, as I've mentioned below. Another one that was having people requiring our help desk to be logged in over the weekend was when people move from office to office. We have 15 offices in 5, 6 different states. So when somebody moves from our office in Appleton to our office in Kansas City, somebody's got to be logged in over the weekend to make sure that their home folder makes that move. So we were able to automate that process, so we can just schedule it and have it go after hours without any intervention. And finally, we're starting to do a lot of automated reporting on Active Directory. The kinds of tasks that somebody would have to once a month run, Joeware, or a PowerShell script to tell us what accounts haven't been used in 6 months or what computers haven't checked in 90 days. We've been able to automate so that those reports just go right to the help desk system and somebody could act on them on the first of the month. So some of the things that we're planning on doing and we're currently in the process of implementing, our user account creation process. So we won't just be taking them out of our system, we'll be using this to put this in, with the eventual goal of being able to hand our HR department a web portal to say, okay, when somebody comes in, check these boxes on the form, and the system will take care of it. We're also looking at managing our Microsoft Cloud services through that. We're starting to take advantage of a lot of Exchange Online features, such as the online archiving and eventually Office 365 for email. Microsoft provides a whole set of PowerShell commandlets to manage both the licensing end and the Exchange Online end. And finally, we will be getting to vSphere automation. It hasn't been a priority for us, but as we kind of go through this, once we get caught up with the help desk tasks that we want to automate, we'll be going back and automating our vCenter environment. We've already started to lay the groundwork with that for new templates and new templates that we can to deploy, snapshot cleanup scripts, and we have a couple of scripts to reboot servers that need to be rebooted on a weekly or monthly basis.
That's a pretty cool progression there, because usually people start off with automating vSphere and then taking the VMware orchestration tools and applying it to other things. So it's pretty cool that you guys are kind of going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. And that that was kind of where our focus began with. Actually, we don't do a lot of building up and tearing down VMs or a lot of automation on that vSphere side. So we had a lot more needs on the day-to-day administration end that maybe some companies have automated on that end to begin with scheduled tasks or other batch scheduling software. We didn't have any of that, and that's kind of the place we wanted to start from. So how do we go about automating Active Directory with vCenter Orchestrator? Well, to start with, there is a plugin for VCO that will let you do tasks in Active Directory. We decided not to start with that. Part of that is because I'm not very comfortable with JavaScript. I'm much more comfortable with PowerShell. And given the timelines that we had for automating some of the tasks, it didn't make sense to try to learn a new language and a whole new system. It also made our stuff more portable. If vCenter Orchestrator didn't work out, we would have been able to take our jobs out of that, take them to something else. Thankfully, it did work out. Obviously, if it didn't, we wouldn't be giving this talk today. So to start with, we need the VCO PowerShell module. You can get that out on the VMware Solutions Exchange. It is one of the modules that VMware has built. We'll also need a tool within PowerShell to manage Active Directory. Now there's kind of two choices for that. You could either go with the Quest tools or with the Microsoft AD module. Or if you're really hardcore, you could do it all in straight LDAP and do all your LDAP calls directly from PowerShell. Your choice of whether you go with the Quest tools or the Microsoft AD module depends on your environment. If you have a lot of Server 2008 R2 or newer, you have Server 2008 R2 or newer domain controllers, and you're going to be executing the scripts on 2008 R2, the Microsoft AD module is probably the one for you. It's already built in. Otherwise, you're going to want to look at the Quest tools. That's another module you can install. It's great if you're working still with 2003 domain controllers. And finally, we're going to need some server to execute our script on. We obviously don't want to be running our scripts directly against a domain controller and doing WinRM into that. For security, a lot of security people would probably pitch a conniption if they found out you were doing something like that. So you want to set up another server just to execute and store your scripts. When using the VCO PowerShell module, you're given two options for connecting. One of them is OpenSSH. I don't know how many people are familiar with running OpenSSH on Windows. I had a really hard time trying to get it to work with Active Directory authentication. The other option is to do WinRM. To do that, you need to set up Kerberos authentication if you're using the VCO appliance. Mike Preston, who presented on vCenter Orchestrator a couple of weeks ago, has a pretty good blog up on a good blog post up on his site on how to set up that with the 5.5 appliance. So if you want to check that out, I have the link right here. Also, when you're working with Active Directory, you need to make sure that you set your Kerberos ticket to forward the credentials on. When I was doing testing, the Microsoft AD commandlets did not work right, and I got a lot of authentication failed errors if I didn't have a line in there that said forwardable equals true. So if you're going to be automating AD, if you're going to be using the Microsoft commandlets, you want to make sure you have that line in your Kerberos file. And here's a sample of how that file would look. And this is from my home test lab here, but this is kind of how the Kerberos file would look if you followed Mike's directions and added that forwardable line in. So the first example here that we're going to show is moving a user's home directory from one server to another. This is something that our help desk actually requested. One of our users came to me and said, we're spending a lot of time at night or on the weekends logged in and babysitting these file moves. So we put together a script, we put it in vCenter Orchestrator to address that need. So what we're going to do here is there's a couple of steps we have laid out. First is, we need to get the user's home directory, and we're going to pull that right out of Active Directory. We need to copy their files to the new server. We need to update Active Directory so that when the user logs in next time, it'll map to the correct folder. And finally, we don't want to delete that folder just in case Robocopy didn't copy everything over. So we just want to rename it and have somebody go back later to remove it when we're sure that all that data has been moved and the user's not missing anything. So here, let me hop out of here for a second. All right, so let me bring up the job here. It's this move H drive. And in our environment here, user's home drive is mapped to the letter H. So for the sake of anybody who would log in, you bring a new help desk person in, we wanted to keep it naming simple for it. So let me just kind of show you here how this job would work. Because we're working with PowerShell, we can only pass one variable into the argument unless we kind of take all of our parameters that we need, create them or add them together to create one string and then pass it through. So we have a little JavaScript file here that takes the two parameters we need, it joins them together as a string, and then it'll pass that through to the PowerShell job with the name of the script that needs to run. So if I bring up the edit window here, just kind of show you quickly, we have a script that's in here. This is the script that will move the user's home folder. We have the name of the server that's going to be executing that job. And then we'll take all that. We have two parameters that get called when the script is run. We need to know the person's username, and we need to know the location that they are going to be moving to. It'll join that together into a string called PowerShell CMD, and then that will be passed into the command to invoke that script. So we have the name of the script here is the external script. Our arguments are that PowerShell CMD that the JavaScript put together as a string, and then we have our host. So this will all execute as one big job using WinRM. One other thing we did too to make this really simple on our help desk users is I took advantage of some of the features of the presentation tab. What this lets me do is it lets me kind of control either what data goes in, what fields are mandatory. So if I go to run this job and I don't have the username put in, for instance, it's not even going to get past the next step to fail. It's just going to throw something up on the screen saying this field is mandatory. One other thing I did too for the location field is I set up a list of predefined answers. So when they run this script, they can only select the offices or the locations that are there. They don't have to try to remember the location name or the location code. They'll just pick it from a dropdown. So let's go ahead and run this here. So what we're going to do here is we have a test user in here under Office 1. Okay, where is Office 2 called Office 2 user. This user is going to be moving to Office 1. And if we pull up their account properties, as you can see, they have an H drive. It's located in the users 2 folder, Office 2 user documents. So what we're going to do now is when we run this job, as they're going to move to Office 1, so it's going to move them to the users folder. It'll update Active Directory, and it will copy those files for us. So as you can see here, I only have 2 choices. I can either pick Office 1 or Office 2. So Office 2 is moving, user is moving to Office 1. And it will take just a second here to start. Unfortunately, I think my home lab is actually ballooning right now, and I'm running a few too many things in it, so it does take a couple of extra seconds to kick these off. So, all right, as we can see here, it is running the job right now, executing the script. And if we were to go out here to our users folder, we'll see it's already created an Office 2 folder and documents, and it has completed successfully. Now, Office 2 user thankfully had no files, but now if we update or refresh our view in Active Directory and look at their profile, we'll see that it's changed. Before this was users 2, and now it's just user. All right, so before we move on to the next section, are there any questions out there?
Again, you can use the question window or you can use Twitter. I'm monitoring both items. So far, no questions.
Okay.
Don't be shy, guys.
Okay, so now we're going to move on here and talk about automating Exchange a little bit.
Actually, we do have a question coming in.
Okay.
First of all, let's see if I can unmute Kellen. All right, let's go ahead. All right, so Kellen, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Have you ever tried have you ever tried to automate the task of putting a server that has a DAG into maintenance mode?
No, I haven't. I don't have a DAG in my environment, unfortunately, to test that, or to even try that. So I haven't tried it. I'd be interested in looking into how to do that, and I'm sure it's something we could do. And actually, as we move on, Exchange, automating that part of it has some different things that you would need to do, I would think. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure because I don't have a DAG and I haven't had a chance to try anything like that.
Well, I'll try it and I'll let you know because this sounds pretty interesting to me, and there's probably about 3 or 4 commands you always have to do.
Okay.
And just automating it and having one button would make life so much easier.
Okay.
Because I always have to find the bookmark. I hate that.
Okay, thank you, Kellen, for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have a question from Eric. It is, will this work in a domain migration of users as well?
I'm not sure. Eric, do you mean like, will this work to migrate the users? Or because if you want to migrate the users, I know Microsoft has a whole different toolkit for that, and that's not something I would think you would automate with PowerShell.
Okay. So Eric, do you have a microphone? If so, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Just raise your hand, Eric, if you'd like to be unmuted, and you can provide more context to your question. All right, I'm going to unmute you.
Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead, Eric, you're live.
All right. Yeah, I know Microsoft has a tool. Just looking at the way this PowerShell worked, though, it looked pretty efficient compared to when we used the Microsoft tool.
Okay.
So I didn't know if you could actually point to two separate domains, pull the data from one domain and into another.
Oh, okay. I think I see what you're looking to do here. That's probably going to be something better handled by the Quest tools. I haven't done it with Orchestrator, but at my previous job, we had 2 domains and there were users in both domains. As we did a migration, we were pulling data using PowerShell from one to the other. We'd migrate the user, then we'd connect to one domain, find their home folder, and migrate it over, and then update the new user account with the new location. If I were going to do something like that, I would definitely want to use the Quest tools because I believe those work better with multiple domains. You can switch context or switch domains easier. I have never tried anything like that with the Microsoft AD tools, but I do know it can be done. It would just be a matter of finding. I think I have a copy of that script somewhere in my files. So if you want to send me a DM on Twitter or in the chat window, send your email to Trevor so he can pass it on to me, and I'll get in touch with you after this is over and see if I can either find my notes on that or find the script itself.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. We use the just the regular Microsoft tools. We didn't have the Quest tools at the time. So
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure, and also if you'd like, Sean, we can actually put this in the show notes if there are any links or any bookmarks that you think are great for the listeners to have in their back pocket. You can share that with us and we can put that in the blog post as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'll have to get you those later tonight.
Sure, whenever you can. Next questions are from Ray. How long did it take to make a decision between using VCO and getting your first working workflow? So for example, you decided, okay, we're going to use VCO, and when you had task number 1 that was going to be automated, how long did it take you to figure that all out and get it out and running?
Total time I think was 2 weeks, but I didn't spend 2 weeks obviously just pounding away at a keyboard to get that done. So, well, we initially looked at VCO and said, and I'll be perfectly honest here, the first time we looked at it and went, oh, this uses JavaScript, this might be too difficult. Went to a couple of other tools, tried them out, and said, these can't do what we want to do, but VCO can. So we actually then picked it up again and really dug into it. And there was about a month between when we first looked at VCO and when we came back to it. But once we made the decision to go with VCO, we already had most of the scripts written. It was more or less modifying and testing, and that took about 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's kind of like a step-through process where maybe parts of the process might have been automated, and then parts were maybe still a little bit manual, or maybe one-offs with shell scripts or something, and then finally you fine-tuned everything into a working workflow?
When we started at the beginning and when we first looked at VCO, we actually had none of this automated. And as we kind of went through and started looking at tools, we kind of designed with the mindset of, well, this may not be the final tool, but we're going to write the script. So by the time we picked VCO back up, we had actually done most of the work to get the back-end scripts developed. Then it was just a matter of fitting it in, testing, making sure we had the right pieces within VCO to execute it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Okay, so no other questions at the moment, so feel free to go on.
All right, so when it comes to automating Exchange, there were a couple of other catches we came across. We initially tried to do it with WinRM, like we were doing with Active Directory, but WinRM and the Exchange PowerShell commands really don't work well together. I'm not sure exactly what the reason for it is. There were a few other people who have tried something similar to this, but it looks like it has to do with the way Exchange handles its PowerShell commands. If you look on your Exchange server, there's actually an IIS website that the commandlets connect through to execute. And there were some ways that you could make it work with WinRM, but it required either doing Kerberos delegation or CRED SSP, and that adds additional complexity to the setup and additional testing. So instead of worrying about all that, we actually started looking at finding a way to do it through SSH. Because when you log in, when you set up an SSH server on your Windows box and you log into that, you're essentially logging in with a regular interactive session, and all you're seeing is a command line. So we tried a couple. We settled on a Power SSHL server. It's essentially is what it is in its name. It's a SSH server for PowerShell. We settled on this one because it also has a VCO plugin. It's a .1 version written by Jorg Lu, and I will get the link for that, but it is up on his VCO site. When we set this up, this server up, they do support running the Exchange commandlets in an SSH session. So we gave it a try, and it actually worked really well. So in order to make it work perfectly, though, we actually have to make a change to the script that you run as part of the Exchange connection process. If you ever load up, oops. If you ever, okay, there we go. If we ever load up the Exchange management shell on any server you install it on, you'll notice it's always running through a scripted process. Microsoft stores those scripts in the Exchange server installation directory. There's a bin folder in there. So what we need to do is we actually need to grab that file. There's a couple of lines that we need to comment out. Those lines mainly have to do with how it presents itself on the screen. If you remember when you load up the Exchange management shell, it always does this thing where it doubles its width, changes all the colors, displays, a helpful introduction for commandlets, how to get to the Exchange blog, a command of the day sort of thing. We need to comment all that out. We just need it to connect to Exchange to give us all those access to all the commandlets. When we do this, we want to make sure we don't overwrite the original file. We want to save it as like a remote connectivity. I think it's remote connection.ps1. We'll save it as like remote connection test or remote connection 2.ps1. This file we'll need to put at the top of all our Exchange scripts so it loads up. So our example here for this one is creating a resource mailbox. Now in Exchange, this could be anything. This could be a meeting room, a shared mailbox of some sort, a piece of equipment, anything that could be checked out as a resource. Again, we'll be using input validation on the presentation tabs to make sure that everything we put in is correct. So the steps for creating this is, we'll create the meeting room mailbox in Exchange. We'll assign our conference room booking policies. We set the room information and set room security. So, that kind of covers everything you'd want to do. So when you pull that meeting room up in Outlook, it has, whether or not it has a projector or a computer or any other sort of resources users would want to use. We want to make sure that we have our meeting room managers or meeting room delegates set up, and we want to make sure that our booking policy is assigned. So if Joe Blow in another office tries to book it, it has to get approved through Millie the secretary before it goes on to actually being booked and that he could use that room. All right, so if we switch over here, and we pull up our script, I have it in here somewhere. Okay. All right, this will just take a second here. I have it.
So by the way, as you're looking for your script, do you do any source code control? Do you use GitHub or anything like that?
Not at the moment. It will be one of
Okay.
those things that I want to put in.
Sure.
There are a number of other tasks that need to be addressed first. So
Sure.
my list is kind of a mile long.
I think that's true for everybody else.
Yeah, and that falls near low priority right now. We do have a network share that we store all this on. So it is being backed up nightly when that job runs. So, all right. So if you ever, this is the remote exchange remote-exchange.ps1 script. Whenever you load the exchange management shell, this script will run. So there's a couple of lines in here that we need to comment out, and they cram a lot into this script. So there is, as you'll see here, here's all the banner that it writes when it loads, changes the text color to yellow. So there is a function here that loads, that couple of functions that get called here when that script loads. The first being get exchange banner and get tip. We need to comment those out because those are the two scripts or the two functions that actually make the screen wide, that start scrolling all that text. So we want to comment those out. What happened when we initially tried to do this without commenting those lines out is it would actually start throwing up errors saying that it was trying to make changes to the screen size and it couldn't do it because it was an SSH window. So it would throw out an error and it would actually cancel. So, and then when we do our conference rooms, there's a couple of different scripts that will run for this. What we decided to do with this, instead of trying to build one monolithic script that handles all the different tasks, is that we wanted to break it up into different chunks. One is it makes it easier to edit. If we have to go in and make a change, we're not trying to find the line we need to change, making sure, that if we forget a comma or a bracket or something, that we're not trying to dig through an entire gigantic script to find it. Okay. So kind of here's our task sequence here. We have 3 tasks that will run to create the conference room. There's the one that will create the mailbox. There's one that will configure the room resources, and then there's one that will set the security on the room. So we have these 3 scripts here. You'll also notice that we do have a little bit of error trapping with this. If the job happens to fail, it will kick off another script that will send an email to the administrators saying we couldn't create this, it failed at this step. So here's kind of a general rundown of it. The scripts themselves are pretty basic. Setting the conference room, new mailbox, set calendar processing to set the conference room scheduling process. One thing that we do with this, like we did with the last one where we had drop-down lists for setting the office location, for this one we have a bunch of Boolean fields that we've set up, and basically when they go through to set up the conference room, it'll ask them, does this conference room have a TV? Yes or no. Does it have a computer? Yes or no. A phone with a conference pod, and so on. What we do with that is, before we execute the script to set up the resources, we actually have some JavaScript that will go through and parse it, and it will basically add it as a parameter to the script before it runs. So as you see here, this is the script as it runs. Here's all my parameters. Oops. And what'll happen is when I go through, it's going to check to see if I have all those parameters, and it'll just add it to the list of resources that will be added when that script runs. You'll see here at the top here, we have our remote exchange test script that will allow us to connect to Exchange. We also have to do this allow clobber in order for some of the commands to show up properly. So, and finally, at the end, we set our security on it. You know, if we have a security group for a location, for instance, it'll automatically add it to the room. We can also set it up so, for instance, if our IT people are supposed to manage those rooms, you know, it automatically adds it. And in one instance, we have some training rooms for, as an example, we can set up a separate group of training room editors to also be added based on flags that we set. Right, so let's go ahead. We'll start this workflow here. So as you can see here, it's kind of your basic form. You know, we'll just call this our test conf room. We can say, you know, this conference room is supposed to hold 250 people, and it has a projector. It has a conference pod. It has a desktop. You know, so we can select all the options that we would need, and this is something you can customize. I mean, if you have conference rooms that have Cisco telepresence systems, you know, Exchange allows you to add any resource essentially that you need. It's just a custom schema that you can set up. So you can go through and configure all that, and then you just have to add that into your list of items here in Orchestrator. So we'll go ahead and submit. All right, and we'll see here, you know, it's going to run through here and go ahead and create them all, or create everything. Now, there is a bit of delay programmed into this because when we initially tried to automate this process, you know, it goes really quick. And there was a step when setting up the conference room that if it went from creating the mailbox to trying to set the calendar processing, if we didn't wait at least 15 seconds, it would error out. It wouldn't be able to find the mailbox. Even though we were using the same domain controller to execute all the tasks, it would still error out. So we had to put in a 30-second wait to make sure that the mailbox was fully created before we could start setting the different parameters here for booking policy and whatnot. All right, and it looks like this one has finished creating. So if we actually go into Exchange now and we refresh our room, we'll see here's our test conference room that we created. And if we look at our, you know, our booking policy, our resource policy, normally this is not 720 days for a booking window. You don't have all day to book. We'll actually see that those are options that we set here in our booking policy. So for instance, you know, booking window in days, 720. You know, max duration in minutes. We'll also see that if we look at our custom property, here's our resource capacity. Here's the items that we selected that room had. So it goes through and it sets all this up for you, so you don't have to go in there and try to set this up by hand. All right. Any questions?
No questions so far on Twitter or on GoToWebinar. Again, ladies and gentlemen, oh, here we go, another question from Kellen. 1 second. All right, Kellen, you are unmuted.
Sean, are you guys doing anything with out of office or anything like that?
Not yet.
We actually took that Glenn's Exchange dev blog, and we actually took his code, rewrote it for ourselves using PowerShell and the EWS API. And what we actually are, and what we're actually doing is we're actually taking every like hour it'll go and grab information, and what it does is it creates a flat file, or excuse me, a flat HTML file, and our front desk grabs it and they can see who's out of the office, so they can tell for like fire code and stuff like that.
Oh.
But the other thing we're doing with that too is that we send automated email messages at 6 a.m. and noon to tell who's in and out of the office. So if you ever were interested in that kind of code, I can definitely get that to you too.
That is very interesting. I think that is something that that our administrative assistants and receptionists would definitely be interested in. So
Sure.
I can hit you up on Twitter after this is done and we can talk.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
And Kellen, what's your Twitter handle?
It's at KillenDam.
Oh, that's easy. Okay. All right. Anything else, Kellen?
Nope.
Okay. So if anybody else would like to ask a question live, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and unmute you. And again, let me pop over here to Twitter. Let's see if there's any questions over here. All right. The vBrownBag hashtag is pretty quiet tonight. All right. Let's see. No other hands going up. Okay. So Sean, is there anything else you'd like to show right now, or pretty much it's Q&A time?
I have 2 more sections here quickly to go through. They're not going to take very long.
Okay.
So we kind of saw how to administer Active Directory as an entity and how to administer Exchange as an entity, and kind of the separate techniques for doing those in vCenter Orchestrator. As you kind of go through this, though, Active Directory and Exchange are so integrated. A lot of times you're not just going to be doing something in Exchange or just in Active Directory, especially when it comes to users. So because vCenter Orchestrator is architected the way it is, you can grab workflows or elements of workflows and just basically kind of mix them up together in a custom workflow. You'll notice the Active Directory one, where we moved the user's home folder to a new location. It used an out-of-the-box workflow for invoking a PowerShell script on a remote host. The one for Exchange used one that was built by Jorg to execute a PowerShell script through SSH. So we can combine all this. So as you get into more complicated tasks, especially ones that are very well documented but require working with multiple systems, you can bring all this together into one giant custom workflow. The 2 best examples of that: adding a new user and terminating a user. Those are processes that will touch many different systems, and not just Active Directory or Exchange, but they may touch a phone system, they may touch Link, they may touch SharePoint, VMware View. The list goes on. There's so many systems that can be touched when a help desk has to set up a new user. So we can do all this, or almost all of this. I'm not entirely sure about phone systems. I'm not aware of too many that actually have a PowerShell provider or a REST API, but we can do the rest of this in PowerShell. we could take all these tasks, put them into a workflow, and really lighten the load on our help desks. So here's an example of one that we use in production. This was actually the first thing that we did with vCenter, Orchestrator, and PowerShell, was we automated about 95% of our user termination process. And it covers most of the tasks that are shown here. There's a couple other things that we have to move around. We also do with PowerShell that are very specific to our business. But if you think about when you disable a user because they're termed, you have to disable their user account. You may or may not go through and take them out of all their Active Directory groups. You may move their account to another OU so you can keep track of which ones have to be deleted. You want to disable their mailbox. You want to export it for backup. You want to back up their user data, so if they had stuff out there on their home folder, you want to pull that into a central location. You may or may not clean up their account and take all the attributes off of it, so if they happen to pop up in the Outlook address book, people don't still think they're employed there. And if last but not least, you want to change their password. So at least in our process, these were the steps that we had to take. So we were able to put all this into one workflow and automate the entire process. So let me show you here kind of how this looks. It's actually a rather large job. It has quite a few steps, and I'm not sure I'll be able to fit it all in this window. I may have to zoom out. And that's probably too small to see. There we go. So here's the user termination process that we use. All right, or most of it. We go through, we disable their user account. We move all their data to another file share, so it's off the production file shares. We want to set up our folder tree for that. We need to disable their mailbox, remove the user from any groups that they're a part of. And then depending on when the termination happens, if we get that call from HR at 10 o'clock in the morning saying we're walking this person out, well, we don't want to be copying their files over the WAN from a remote location in the middle of the business day. So we want to check to see what time it is, and if it's not 5 o'clock, we're going to put that job in a waiting state. And we're going to say, wait until it is 5 o'clock, then move their files. Then, we back up and delete their home folder, and then we change their password, and we clear out their AD fields. In our production one, we recently added for the first step, we're going to wipe your phone. If you have a phone that is set up for ActiveSync, first thing we do, we're wiping it when this process runs. Now, one of the things we do, and we've started to do a lot of this, is we actually schedule this task. 9 times out of 10, HR will let us know, hey, they put their notice in, this is going to be their last day. Well, we can now go in, schedule that task so that at 5 o'clock on their last day, this account process takes over and automatically shuts them down. Prior to that, a termination may wait till Monday morning. Who wants to stay around at 5 o'clock on a Friday night going through and doing all these steps on a checklist? It's also made us more accurate. We had a lot of Active Directory groups that were secured. Only people with certain rights within the domain could actually manage those. Well, with the way we set this job up, it does use a shared job or a shared account to run this job. That account has rights to manage all the groups that it needs to. And I'll actually talk a little bit about security in my next slide here. But yeah, so in here we have Office User 1. Office User 1 said, I'm taking a new opportunity. I'm moving on to this other company over here. Well, this user, they have VPN access. They are part of some distribution and security groups. They have rights to the conference, to edit some of our conference rooms. So we want to make sure that when we shut their account off, that all these groups are removed. We want to make sure that we grab any files that they have in their H drive or their home folder and back them up to another location. So let's go ahead. We're going to start this up here. So for here, we just need Office 1 user, and then we'll put in their supervisor, because when we do shut off their email, we also do set up forwarding right away. So we're going to go ahead, we'll start this up. And we'll see here pretty quick, we'll see this account's in the Office 1 OU. And now it's not. It's actually been moved to another OU called Disabled Accounts, where the user will now reside until it's deleted. We'll also see here on our network share that Office 1 user has a folder tree set up for any other files that would need to be backed up. It's also already started to export a PST file for them out of Exchange. And anytime we do copies like this for a user termination, we like to take the Robocopy logs and copy them into here. That way, if there is a question of whether or not something got copied, we're not trying to dig up the logs on whatever server or trying to find the folder where those logs are stored. We're just going to grab them right away and copy them over. So let's see where we're at here. All right, well, now we're just waiting for the right time. It has I believe a 2-minute delay in here before it'll back up any of their files from their home folder. But I don't even think there's anything in there. Oh, okay, 2 dummy documents. So yeah, that's basically the whole process. At the end of this, it will send out an email to the help desk saying, hey, we just turned this account. Now, the nice part about this too is we can actually go back and see if there is a question about who handled the termination, or if somebody was terminated who shouldn't have been, we can go back and see who ran that. You know, we can see that administrator kicked off this account at 8:30 Central Time, and that it paused waiting at about 8:30 as well. So that's basically the gist of it, and it is still on pause. Okay, so that's basically how this whole process runs. And we'll actually see those files in here now, and we'll see a log file, just basically saying it copied these 2 files over. And that's it. Any questions?
No questions that I can see in the question window or on Twitter, but Craig has been offering some helpful links on there and on Twitter. So there's things such as a reference to Exchange 2010 commandlets for PowerShell to improve scripts, as well as conflict with WinRM may create low session memory, creating hard to troubleshoot issues. So he posted a link about bumping up the memory with VCO.
All right. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, and again, if anyone would like to be unmuted, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. Otherwise, we have just about come up to the top of the hour. So I don't see any questions. I'll go ahead and close off the recording. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I have one more slide, actually. This will be really quick.
Son. Go ahead.
All right. So finally, obviously, this slide's pretty much common sense, but I did want to throw it in there anyway. When you're doing something like this, because a lot of this is going to be shared credentials, although the help desk won't see it, you know, they'll still be utilizing it. We want to run this with the least possible amount of privilege. in Active Directory, that's using the delegation of authority wizard. In Exchange, you can create custom roles either through PowerShell or through the Exchange control panel. And then this is just kind of the list of permissions that you would need either on your OUs individually or Active Directory wide to be able to do this with a least privilege mindset. So with that, we haven't really seen any questions, so well, that's it. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight to listen. Thank you.
Okay, and Sean, can you go ahead and share your website address one more time?
Oh, yeah. It is SeanMassey.net.
Okay. And do you have any speaking engagements at a VMUG or anything else you'd like to plug?
Not at the moment. Oh, yeah, I do actually. On April 22nd, I will be doing a home lab presentation at the Wisconsin VMUG conference.
Okay, I'm sure that's going to be a pretty cool demonstration out there. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Sean, for this great presentation. I'm sure there's a lot of VMware administrators out there just racking their brains trying to figure out how do I get some of these Exchange and Active Directory processes automated. So we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you everyone for joining.
All right, well, thank you.